British Spy Stories. Season 3. Official Denial. Episode 23. There is a vague rumble of thunder as dawn breaks over London. It wakes Marjorie 5 minutes before her alarm. She immediately swings her legs out of bed and goes into the bathroom. The hair dye that she bought for cash at the local corner shop in St John's Wood last night turns out to be more complex to use than she thought, because she's going from brunette to blonde. It takes too long, but eventually she slips away from the flat in the early half-light, before her mother has woken up. Marjorie has to see Maxime face to face. She doesn't want to leave any trail of evidence about her plans, so she hasn't messaged him either. She knows the procedure that Five will use for catching double agents. She helped write some of it herself, ironically. They will send out 2 agents to search for her. They'll make her an offer of retirement somewhere in the West Country, a cottage in Dorset, where she can tend the garden. In her mind, she considers if that might be an acceptable outcome. Maybe she should go straight to Thames House and surrender to the authorities. But she's not sure in her mind. Yet. She takes the first tube train going south, without thinking where she'll get off. In the end, she goes to the south bank of the Thames and finds a cafe near Waterloo. It caters for London cab drivers and is open all night. It has a long, narrow room of harsh lighting and a counter at the far end, with too many tables squeezed into the space between. She has to weave in between the chairs to get to the Turkish man who runs it. She orders a bacon sandwich and tea, as those are the first things on the scruffy menu displayed on the wall behind the man's head. The drivers only briefly look around at her, as they're used to people catching the first train home to the suburbs, following a night out and a night of sex, after meeting someone in a London club. Marjorie doesn't know that, but the men do, and one gives her a smile and a knowing look. She turns away and finds a table in one corner. The Turkish man walks over and puts the sandwich down in front of her, and she discovers that she's hungrier than she thought. She leaves the place after only 20 minutes, and gets a cab from outside Waterloo to take her to Hammersmith. Then she walks the rest of the way up to the address that she has for Maxime. She has never been to his house in the years that he has been running her. They have always met discreetly in various locations that the SVR have, right across the capital. Marjorie is aware that Maxime is fond of her, and has used that to her advantage over the years. She also knows that the money she has been paid by Moscow is far greater than his other agents. Maxime told her that at the end of a dinner in Chelsea 2 years ago, after he had drunk nearly a bottle of wine all to himself, and his tongue was looser than usual. She turns into Minford Gardens and checks the number of his house on her phone. The place is halfway along in a row of identical Victorian houses, with tall steps up to the front doors. At some stage, the house at number 30 had been split into flats, and 2 front doors installed in the same width as the wide original Victorian door. She walks up and presses the doorbell next to 30A. Then she waits. There are no cars in the street, and a hush descends around her as she stands on the doorstep. "Come on, Maxime," she says under her breath. She looks through the narrow side window of the portico. She can see no lights through the glass, and there is no sound of Maxime's slippered feet shuffling towards the door to let her in. Marjorie raps on the glass in case he hasn't heard the bell, but it has no effect. Suddenly the front door of 30B next door swings open, and Marjorie jumps. "Oh, sorry," says a tall man with short brown hair as he emerges from the door wearing an overcoat and scarf. "You off to Maxime?" "Yes, but I don't think he's in," she says, with masterful control of her nerves. "I haven't seen him, actually," says the man. "Not for a day or two. He's normally around because we chat if we see each other." Her mind spins through how this guy can help her. "You don't have a key, do you?" she says. "I'm his daughter." "No, sorry. You worried about him then?" says the man. "Well, Dad is forgetful sometimes." "Yeah, my mum's the same. They're all getting on." He frowns at the shared responsibility of looking after aging parents. "Is there a back way in?" says Marjorie. "Yeah, because your dad's got the garden. There's an alleyway and a back gate," he says. "You must have seen it if you visited before." "I haven't visited for a few years, and I've never been down the alleyway. Is there an entrance off the road?" "I'll show you. I'm going that way," he says. The man walks along with her until they reach a nearly hidden route from the street that leads into the back gardens. "Here you go." She thanks him and the man walks off along Mintford Gardens. Marjorie drops down the very narrow passageway that passes between two of the blocks of houses. The path was only 2 feet wide originally, and now it's overgrown with weeds and grass, reducing the gap to no more than 12 inches. She pushes on through the foliage and turns the corner to the part of the route that will reach the garden of 30A. Marjorie counts along the number of houses as she had done on the street, as the neighbour had been showing her where the alleyway started. The garden gate to number 30 doesn't look like it's been used for many years, and she has to lift it up and over the long grass to get it open at all. She steps through and across the overgrown lawn. There is a shed to one side that looks equally unused. The garden is at the same level as the street at the front, and unusually, there are no basements in these houses. There are steps up from the grass to a set of French doors at the back of the house. Marjorie climbs up and tries the handle of the French doors. They're locked, and she pushes her face up against the glass and puts her hand up to cover the reflection of the light outside and give a clear view of the inside. She can see no one in the kitchen that sits along the rear of Maxime's flat. She tries the door handle again, for no logical reason, then searches the patio and finds a stone. Marjorie looks around in all directions before hitting the stone against the glass, which shatters with what seems a tremendously loud crash, but it gives her access to the inside handle and the key that has been left in the lock. Marjorie walks cat-like through the flat. She checks in each room. There is no sign of him in the 2 bedrooms or the bathroom. As she moves through into the lounge, she sees him, slumped backwards, in one of the 2 chairs, either side of the fireplace. Her face changes from concern to fear. She walks over to the Russian and feels his hand. It is stone cold. There are no obvious signs of death about him. He looks as though he has just stopped, without reason. Her innate self-preservation pushes into her mind about what she needs to do now. Maxime is her only Russian contact. That's the way all spy running works. You know only one other person. So if the chain is broken, you can't talk. Moscow must have done this, she thinks. It's not the way MI5 tends to work. This clinical operation smacks of the SVR. What does this mean for her now? If the Russians have killed Maxime, she may be next. They must have both outlived their usefulness. She can feel her heart quicken and knows that she needs to get away from here. She makes her way back through the flat and out through the French doors. Then Marjorie pushes on through the garden to the overgrown path beyond. When Hans had said he wanted to talk to Gabby this morning, she suggested they go to get some fresh air in the city park, which is 10 minutes from the hotel. They walk through the streets and across the vast expanse of Hozuk Tar, the Heroes' Square, with its tall column and stone pillars stretching out either side. The autumn sun splays out across the bridge that takes them over the lake and into the greenery beyond. "What did you want to discuss, Gordon?" she says, once they're away from everybody else. "Nadia Kuval." "What about her?" "Can we extract her?" he says. She pulls her eyebrows together. "She's not one of our assets. She has no inherent value to British interests now Taras is dead." "I just thought—" "What did you think?" She interrupts and turns to look at him. "That maybe we could help her. And Elena." Gabby narrows her eyes. "What's this girl mean to you, Gordon?" "Nothing, but she's in danger because of what happened to Taras. The gang will kill her if they can." Gabby smiles slightly. "Don't look at me like that." "She's a civilian and associated with crime. Her life's shit, but she's a grown-up." "But we could help her." "We're not a travel agency." "But why not?" he says. "You know what war is like. You've been in proper battlefields. You know people get pissed on." "But if you have the opportunity—" He doesn't finish the sentence. Gabby doesn't want to fall out with him the day before they go to Bucharest. So she says, "Let me think about it." She leaves a gap, then changes the subject. "Are we ready for the final stage of Millport?" "Yeah, the drones arrive this afternoon," he says. "Do you think Jenny is back up to strength?" "She's tough. She's got that same gutsiness that you have." He turns his eyes to see her reaction. "She'll go a long way." "I'm not sure she's ready yet," says Gabby. "She's only got a few years under her belt. We can't afford to have a second failure on this op. We won't get another chance if we don't terminate Redwig this time." "You can't leave her out." Gabby shrugs and takes a sharp breath out through her nose. "Maybe," she says. Marjorie's feet are starting to ache after walking from Shepherd's Bush, up Holland Park Avenue and across Hyde Park. She didn't want to take a taxi, as she has started to feel like a woman on the run. Throughout the journey, her brain turns over her options. She mentally lists the friends she could stay with, somewhere in the anonymity of the British provinces. Piccadilly is packed when she arrives there, and she has to dodge the stream of people coming the opposite way along the pavement as she passes the Ritz Hotel. 5 minutes later, she crosses the road and walks into another hotel that she knows, up in the back streets and away from the main drag. She buys coffee and cake with cash and sits next to the window, lost in her own thoughts. She can't remember being in a situation like this before. She has gone through her life without ever really thinking about any other possible routes or options than the one she's following. Always plan A. But now, she needs a fallback. Marjorie's survival instinct is forcing her to think about this situation as an opportunity to start again. She takes a mouthful of coffee and catches the eye of a woman opposite her. Their gazes meet for a second time, a minute later, and they both smile at the same time. Then after a moment, the woman gets up and walks the 10 feet between them. "I wonder," she says timidly, "could I join you? We're both on our own." "Of course," says Marjorie, welcoming the diversion away from her life of spying. They talk about why they happen to be here in Piccadilly, except that everything Marjorie says is fiction. Emily Foster has come up from Surrey for the day and will be meeting her husband for dinner after he finishes in the City of London at about 5:30. Emily doesn't often come to town, but she likes to come up to buy things and see the latest exhibitions. Guildford can be a little behind the latest, don't you think? Emily and Jeff have 2 sons, both at boarding school now, and she does miss them. Marjorie can see the woman has little to keep her busy. They finish their tea and coffee at the same time, and Marjorie starts to make noises about going. Emily must go too, if she isn't to be late. They both coincidentally want to go to the bathroom, and find the ladies' toilet in the network of narrow corridors in the basement. The place has 2 cubicles, and they both disappear inside, then reappear a few minutes later, nearly at the same time. Emily has so enjoyed their conversation, and perhaps they could meet up again. As Marjorie turns off the tap and starts to pick up a towel to dry her hands, the tiniest movement registers in the corner of her eye. Emily's hand drops into her handbag, and by chance, the light reflects off the blade of a knife as she draws it out in her fingers. Before she can raise up her arm, Marjorie turns, slaps the woman hard on the face with such force that the blade clatters away against the wall and onto the tiled floor. Emily moves with speed and wraps her hands around Marjorie's neck. She tightens her grip, and Marjorie can feel the air catch in her throat. Emily's fingers turn white at the ends, where they are pressing on her skin. Marjorie can feel dizziness in her head, and her consciousness starting to slip away. They fall to the ground, and Emily doesn't let go. Marjorie's limbs spread across the tiled flooring, and her hand touches something cold. It's the discarded knife. Her fingers grip the handle, and with what seems like her last gasp, she lunges at Emily. The knife pushes into the woman's pale pink silk blouse and up into her stomach. Emily stops and moves her hands to the knife handle, but Marjorie turns the blade in her flesh, and Emily grunts from deep within. Marjorie pulls out the weapon and pushes it back in, but this time further. Emily keels over, hits her head, then collapses onto the floor, spilling red blood across the white tiles. Marjorie lies there, with the woman motionless across her body, her chest heaving to draw in lungfuls of air, and her thoughts a confused mass of what just happened. After a minute, reality starts to push back into her head. She extricates herself from under Emily's body, drags the woman into a cubicle and sits her up as best she can on the toilet seat. There's blood on Marjorie's skirt, and she goes back, removes Emily's coat, then puts it on herself and buttons it up over the stains. As she goes to the door, she sees a closed for cleaning sign hanging on the back. She turns off the lights in the room, steps outside, and hangs the sign on the outside. The cold air hits her face as she heads out of the building. She turns 2 corners and reaches the next junction. For a second, she doesn't know which way to turn. Then she continues up towards Piccadilly Circus. 10 minutes later, as she passes a street drain, she drops the knife into the sewer and walks on hurriedly. She knows that she needs to get away now, before the next Russian assassin works out where she is.